2:35. Right, into the first of our support races from the Porsche Cayman Sprint Challenge. We pick up where we left at Thruxton last month, with Charles Clark heading up the championship and the action set to resume with round 6. Tim Harvey and David Addison once again.
It's going to be a grid to be released in a moment onto the final formation lap, and it is a grid that has Steve Roberts on pole position for the first time as the cars are about to be released. The Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain for the 718 iteration of the Porsche Cayman. 3.8 litre, 6-cylinder, mid-mounted boxer engines these cars have, 425 horsepower. They weigh in at about 1,400 kilos, and it is a really good championship, whether you are an am wanting to race a Porsche or a career racing driver with an eye to the future in GT racing. And hopefully, as more and more people become aware of it, it will grow and grow, because it seems to tick every box, but entries are still growing. And one that we do have this weekend, new to the championship, Sam Smelt, former touring car racer, who has done a deal to be on the grid, and he too is going to be a man to watch, especially as he gets more track time in his car over the course of this race. So the car's up towards the tower, that right-hander, and as far as the grid is concerned, it looks like this. Steve Roberts lines up on pole position, 4th in the championship, his first pole in one of these cars with Matthew Armstrong lining up with him. Second row, Harry Foster, double winner at Thruxton, and Charles Clark, who took 2 wins at Silverstone. Then it's Sam Smelt, first time out, and Toby Trice is 6th. 7th, Matt Greenwood. Those 7 drivers all in the pro category. And then you get to the AMs, headed by Cole Cavers, 4 times a winner, ahead of Jason Pelosi. Then it's Rupert Laslett, who has had 1 win in class, and John White rounds out the grid. So we saw at Silverstone at the start of the season, we saw on ITV at Thruxton, good racing, good battles all the way through the field, and with Steve Roberts having taken that first pole position, he is very keen indeed to convert that into a maiden victory in this year's championship.
Well, it's sort of been coming, hasn't it, really, with Steve? I mean, his results have been so impressive and getting better with each meeting. After 3 4th-place finishes, then at Thruxton he had a 3rd and a 2nd. There's only 1 place left to go, Steve, and that's the top of the podium, and he's been on fire this weekend. He was quickest in free testing on Friday, stuck it on pole yesterday, and now he's got to execute a clean race.
Well, Charles Clark, who is only 4th on this grid, is somebody else that's going to be well worth keeping an eye to, because he needs points in the championship to make sure that he stretches that margin over. Harry Foster, the double winner last time out, and we saw how good he was there. So it's certainly becoming a very, very competitive championship. But Steve Roberts, then in the Red Line Racing entry, slots into place on that pole position. With him at the front of the grid, Matthew Armstrong, who won the opening race at Silverstone on the full Grand Prix circuit. There is John White, who missed Thruxton, but he's at the back of the grid here, set to get involved in the battle in AM. So it is going to be a 15-lap or 25-minute race, depending on which comes first. And as the drivers, they're all slotted into position, the green flag shown at the back, and we are good to go. Round 6 of the Porsche Visit Cayman Islands Sprint Challenge Great Britain. Lights go out, it is blast off. Good start there by Steve Roberts. Good getaway also by Matthew Armstrong. And as the cars accelerate down towards Clairvaux for the first time, John White left on the grid, but he gets going now. Roberts defends into the first corner. It is in 2nd place Armstrong, 3rd Harry Foster.
Yeah, as they were left the line, it was a perfect reaction time from Steve Roberts. He got the car away perfectly. These cars do have launch control, but you still have to manage the throttle and the gear changes.
The dust kicked up in the background as the cars come out of the chicane then, and the race leaders down towards the tower. Steve Roberts, experienced driver, Formula Fords, BMWs, Ginettas, now Porsches, knows exactly where to position that car to hang on to the race lead. But he has got Matthew Armstrong, whose dad we've seen racing in Carrera Cup GB, Justin Armstrong. He is right on his tail as they flick through the Jim Clark S's. Yeah,
these cars getting their Michelin tyres up to temperature fairly quickly. ABS as well fitted, which will be helping them here on the braking. Oh,
Charles Clark is wrong, yeah. Around he goes. You were saying about tyres up to temperature.
No, I was also saying about the ABS helping them on the brakes as well.
Right, yes.
But just too deep on the brakes was Charles Clark there. He's never been here before, actually. It's his first visit to Croft, so he was learning the circuit, but he was happy to be, you know, for main competitor Matt Armstrong not to be on pole, but he's now dropped dropped a few places.
Here it is again, completely sideways, coming into shot. He oh so nearly saved it, but in the end the back overtook the front, and he's dropped down to the rear of the field as the leaders go by. Now it is Steve Roberts, Justin Armstrong, and then in third place Harry Foster, before there's a bit of a gap to Toby Trice and Sam Smelt. Charles Clark goes through 10th out of the 11, so he's got work to do, but of course it's points scored in class.
It is points in class, but that's going to hurt his championship lead, isn't it? He's given a big advantage to his biggest rival, Harry Foster and Matt Armstrong.
So the race leaders turn here out of Tower, and if anything now the battle is on for second place rather than the lead, in as much as Harry Foster is there on the tail of Matt Armstrong as they come through Croft. Then the Jim Clark S's, and Steve Roberts trying to build that margin over 4/10 of a second at the start of the lap. Harry Foster in third, brother Louis doing great things in single-seaters in America. His father used to race in the British Touring Car Championship, Nick Foster. But look at the gap that Steve Roberts is pulling, and now he's really being helped by the battle taking up attention for second place.
Yeah, he's very much got his groove on as Steve Roberts. He's in the zone, he needs to carry this on now. It's a different proposition when he's leading the first race. He's won plenty of races in the past, but he's not won one of these Porsche races, so adds a different mental element to it, but I'm sure he's up to the job anyway.
In the AM class right now, it's Jason Pelosi leading, and he has not led the class hitherto. So even though he qualified only second on the grid within the AM category, he leads Carl Cavers and Rupert Laslett, who have taken all the wins between them thus far.
Yes, so good battles in both classes. This is the second and the final visit for the Cayman Sprint Challenge to the TOCA program. Their race calendar will go off after this meeting to Alton Park, Brands Hatch and Donington, but not with the TOCA program. We'll have the Carrera Cup cars back at the next race.
And Steve Roberts right now is still building that advantage, isn't he, as the cars sprint down towards the Jim Clark S's, and at the start of this lap he doubled the gap from 4/10 to 8/10 of a second. Now what about Charles Clark's progress? Well, there isn't any. He's still stuck in 10th place and hasn't found a way past the AM entry of Rupert Laslett. So not only is he a long way down, he's not making progress and therefore not gaining any more points. It's a double whammy as we have a replay here of Rupert Laslett and Carl Cavers absolutely together, going side by side towards Tower, and Rupert Laslett through on the inside up into second in class.
Yes, so we've got a great battle in the AM class, haven't we? It's been the domain very much up until now of Carl Cavers with 4 wins and a second, but he's under big pressure now.
He's indeed, the leader.
Second place now.
Through, that's Foster ahead, isn't it? So Harry Foster goes by up into second spot, and now possibly, given his pace that we saw at Thruxton, can shake off Armstrong and go after the race leader. So Steve Roberts leading by 1.2 seconds starting lap 4, but maybe now he's on borrowed time. Foster getting quicker and quicker. Saw this at Silverstone where he had to do a bit of hard work early on, but as the race wore on, so his car came alive and he became more of a factor. So keep an eye here. The gap 1.2 seconds could be coming down, and this is how he made the move.
Coming up, oh, great last-minute dive. He sold the dummy to Matt Armstrong, didn't he, by staying to the right, and then dived up. That was a great overtake. Really nice by Harry Foster. I was actually thinking that his strength was on this circuit was round the faster back parts of the circuit, perhaps showing some of that love of fast corners that he showed at Thruxton. But I think he's already closing, you know, on Harry Foster. Oh, sorry, on Steve Roberts. We'll see what the lap time is at the end of this lap.
Well, I'd agree. He took a 10th out in the first sector. He's taken 3 10ths out in the second sector and done an absolute best. So Foster is on an absolute mission. So Steve Roberts was getting away, but the gap that he built is disappearing fast. As there, look, the AMs battle away with Charles Clark trying to get through that traffic. Carl Cavers falling down the class then. He was, of course, on pole. He was then mugged initially by Jason Pelosi. Then he's been passed by Rupert Laslett. But he fights back on the inside of Laslett. Whoops, they get themselves together. Sideways, and there's contact. And Carl Cavers and Rupert Laslett involved. But did Charles Clark survive without any damage? Because if he did, then it was by millimetres. They sort themselves out, but that was the 2 AMs getting together as the pro tried to get past, and it all got a bit messy.
It all got messy. They're side by side. Look, you can see from the just a clean move up the inside, but then just running wide. There's contact wheel to wheel, and oh, there was the slightest contact, wasn't there, with Charles Clark's car, but it looked like it was wheel on wheel. And
yeah, Cavers got sideways, didn't he? That's what put him out wide into Rupert Laslett, and then as he came across the road, so he glanced off Charles Clark. Here's the slide. Look, there it is. He's sideways, bang, into the side of Laslett, and bang into the side of Clark as he goes past. So drama coming out of the hairpin.
Yeah, it was that slide midway through the corner, just there. He lost the rear, didn't he? Which made him open the steering, and then they made wheel-to-wheel contact. I'll be amazed if the suspension isn't broken there.
Well, the lead gap was down to 9/10 of a second last time, and it's going to be less than that at the end of this, the 5th lap. So Steve Roberts is going to have to make that car incredibly wide now as they come up towards the timing line. But actually, in that 3rd place, Matt Armstrong is staying with them. In 4th on his own, Toby Trice, Sam Smelts in the red line car 5th, as diving down towards the first corner of Clairvaux goes Steve Roberts. It's a red line racing car in the lead of the race. At Red Line Racing, Simon Leonard's team's home circuit.
Very much a home circuit, and of course they've got British GT as well going on this weekend. As have Parker Racing, so busy weekend for those two teams. But yeah, this is the home circuit for Red Line Racing, where they've had so much success before, and hoping to repeat that with Steve Roberts.
Steve has done the fastest lap of the race, but he needs to dig deep and do an even quicker one here, because last time around 3/10 were pulled back by Harry Foster. They come through the Jim Clark S's once more. And Steve Roberts is now pressing on once again. He's not quite as quick in the first sector, but we're only talking tiny increments between these two. And of course, even if Foster gets right onto the tail of Steve Roberts, he's got enough experience to know how to defend.
Yeah, I wonder if he can pull that same manoeuvre on Steve Roberts that he did on Matt Armstrong. I don't suppose Steve Roberts saw that particularly in his mirrors, so the element of surprise is still there with Harry Foster, but he's definitely closing. His last lap was mere hundredths away from the fastest lap, and it looks like he's closed up again this lap. Let's see what it is across the line.
Armstrong staying with him in that 3rd place. Last time around, the gap was 6/10 of a second. It's now 4/10 of a second, and there are still 9 laps to go. So time is on Foster's side here.
Yeah, and in fairness, they both dropped a bit of time that lap.
This is the Cavers-Laslett battle. They've got themselves back together again. There's probably not much love lost now, and Rupert Laslett is determined to get back ahead. They've had another touch coming up towards the complex, so it's getting a little bit more leery, this. Carl Cavers in the number 22 red, white and blue Veluga entry. Rupert Laslett for Raceway Motorsport, new to Porsche Racing this year, is going to go through as again out wide goes Cavers.
Yeah, but look, you could have fitted a bus between them. They were giving each other an awful lot of room at that hairpin. They didn't want the same again, but through goes Laslett cleanly this time.
Now, all of that has enabled Jason Pelosi to pull well clear up front in that class, going for a maiden class win, and it's also enabled Charles Clark to clear them. He's up into 8th place overall. Despite any damage picked up in the incident, he is still surviving, and he is, as I say, 8th now, currently 7th in class, Charles Clark. He's got a lot of work to do there before he catches up to any of these cars, the pro category, where, look, Roberts and Foster are virtually as one now.
Yeah, they seem to be ending the lap in the same way. He's setting up, Foster's setting up for that dummy. He's not close enough on this lap, but I think there could be a hint of a gap there if he can get right on the tail of Steve Roberts.
So over the line they come. That will put 7 laps in the book, and the margin is 0.262 of a second. So Foster now closer than he has ever been, and applying the pressure to Steve Roberts as they turn their way out of Clairvaux corner. Harry Foster for Team Parker Racing. For Red Line Racing, Steve Roberts leads the way from Hawthorne into the chicane. And of course, Matt Armstrong in 3rd place is staying with them.
He is very much so. So if there's any kind of schmozzle, he could take advantage of it. But we've also seen in the past that Matt Armstrong's car can come on good at the end of the race.
Out of tower they come through that right-hander. And race leader Steve Roberts at the start of this lap. 0.262 of a second up the road out of the first sector. He is fractionally faster by 600ths. I mean, these are the tiny margins we're talking about, but he's still there, secure up front into the 2 right-handed parts of Sunny. Sunny in and then Sunny out through the right-hander, back onto the power, getting ever more overcast at Croft. There is a threat of rain later in the day. Temperatures are dropping, but Steve Roberts, he's working oh so hard inside his race-leading car and comes up towards the complex as lower down the field there. 23 is Jason Pelosi leading in the AM section, but the man right on his tail is Charles Clark, the overall championship leader, and he's on a fight back.
He's on a fight back, but he just lost too much ground as up the inside he goes, coming into the complex. He just lost too much ground with that half spin, if you like. Oh, big old drift. Did you see that? He's used up most of his tyres on this. That was a fairly heavy power oversteer there. Although these cars have got traction control, you can adjust the limit of traction control, and quite clearly Charles Clark hasn't got much of it turned on.
It's great to watch. So he's had a spin, a slide, he's been clipped by errant cars, and he's still pushing as Pelosi goes off the road through the gravel. The AM class leader gets back onto the circuit, but that was a bit odd.
Yeah, he doesn't need to do too much of that. He probably tried to follow Charles Clark in at the same speed that he was going, which was a little bit quicker than his usual speed into Clervaux. But yeah, he doesn't want to lose that class lead, does he?
No, he has a good advantage right now over John White, who is up to second after the tangle between Laslett and Carl Cavers, and Cavers has dropped a long way back now. He's not even completed his most recent lap, so maybe that car has got enough damage to render him out of the race now. For the race lead, however, here they come. Steve Roberts versus Harry Foster into the complex, and it looks as though Matt Armstrong might just be coming back at them a little bit. His last lap was on the right kind of pace, and in the sectors he's chipping away. He was quicker in sector 1, for example, than Roberts, so don't rule out Armstrong for gaining a place if there's a tangle between the top two.
Yeah, certainly Harry Foster is setting up for that same overtake, because the line that Steve Roberts is taking does open the doors fractionally, but he's just not close enough to do the lunge. Steve Roberts is really good through the first part of the complex, and there's just enough too much of a gap to take that lunge at the moment.
Race leaders then flick out of the chicane. And Steve Roberts knows exactly where Harry Foster is. He's aware that the gap has come down, but with a third of the race still to run, he's being able to cope with the pressure. Drops down towards the tower, turns right, gets back onto the power now to drag the car out the other side. Roberts versus Foster, Red Line versus Team Parker, two of the top squads. And I would suggest now, in fact, that Armstrong, if anything, is falling away a bit.
Yeah, it does seem to be on that last lap. Maybe he made a small mistake we didn't see, but the gap has opened up.
There is Rupert Laslett recovering to be third in class. He's had a drama at the hairpin, I think. Let's see him replay. Turns in, gets back onto the power. Whoops, around it goes. It's not Rupert Laslett's corner, that.
No, but I do think that car has probably got suffered some damage in terms of tracking and wheel alignment, and from the result of the heavy impact it had with Carl Cavers. Now look, is this the one? Yes, it is.
Up the inside goes Foster into Steve Roberts. He turns him around, and through goes Armstrong. We said he might be there if the top two tangle. Foster's got to puncture the bite a bit, because that was his move up the inside, and he's ended up turning Steve Roberts out of the lead and giving himself damage. I think he might have done a radiator in that as well, and he had more laps on his side. He didn't need to be overly committed to that, and he's put himself out of the race.
No, but he waited, he was obviously teeing it up. We could see, we knew that was his favourite place to pass. He pulled it off successfully the first time, but he just wasn't close enough. I don't think we'll see on the replay, but we knew it was coming. Here we go. Yeah, he is closer than ever, but not right on the tail. He lunges, and there's contact there. Couldn't see the line that Steve Roberts was taking, but it was probably his normal line. This will give us a better idea of the line. He dives early. Oh, Steve closes the door a little bit, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And at that point, Harry Foster just can't duck out of it.
Well, I suspect that that's going to be discussed post-race, especially as it's taken the leader out of the lead and drops him to second place. Now it's going to be interesting to see whether Steve Roberts can fight back. Here it is from another angle. It's certainly a send. Bang, straight into him.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very difficult manoeuvre to pull off, but having committed himself to the challenge, Harry Foster couldn't get out of it. But Steve Roberts clearly, you know, was entitled to take the corner. We'll just have to see how the clerk of the course sees that.
Indeed, so Colin Oakley, who is the clerk for the Cayman Challenge and for the Carrera Cup GB, we'll have a look. But what it does give us, of course, is a different kind of battle for the race lead. So now, Matt Armstrong there leads by 0.8 of a second from Steve Roberts, who is going to be absolutely committed to trying to retake that race lead. But whether or not the car is going to be compliant remains to be seen, because it will have had a big whack in that impact, and it might not be 100% anymore. We have got under 4 laps of the race to go, and 0.8 of a second is the margin.
Yeah, he will be really upset having led the race all the way through. You can bet now he's got a guide in front of him, someone to mark off. If the car's up to it, I'm sure Steve will close up.
That is Jason Pelosi, who is still clear within the AMs. And John White, second, heading for his best result in the AM category, in fact. It's Jason's first win, so two drivers, both standing on the threshold of their best result in class. Partly helped by the dramas for Rupert Laslett and Carl Cavers. We may not have a massive field in this, but it's given us another lively race. And there are the leaders then with, in Sector 1, Roberts quicker than Armstrong ahead of him. In Sector 2, he's quicker than Armstrong ahead of him. This is game on now. Having been chased earlier, Roberts is chasing, and they've got a back-marking Carl Cavers up the road who gets out of the way. Roberts is sideways, hangs onto the slide, dives into the hairpin, and of course the demise of Harry Foster also helps Charles Clark because it's another place gained and more points for him.
Yeah, I mean Charles Clark will. His chief rival though is Matty Armstrong, so he's gonna have to. He'll have gained points on Harry Foster certainly. But the car in front is actually Sam Smelt, who doesn't score points. He's a guest driver, so that doesn't count. And the next car, Trice's car, is another 11 seconds up the road.
And effectively, Charles Clark then is going to be, although sixth in class on the road, fifth for points.
Yes.
Take out the invisible Sam Smelt, invisible for the purposes of points. Now the gap, 8/10 was half a second last time. 3 laps to go. Steve Roberts, you could argue, deserves this win, but of course Matt Armstrong was doing the right thing, lagging back, waiting to see what panned out ahead of him, and he was in exactly the right place at the right time.
Perfect, and I'm sure he was grinning all over his face, but it's there'll be some chat afterwards about that manoeuvre. It was a lunge, it was a last-minute lunge, a committed lunge, but it's always on the overtaking car to pull the move off cleanly, and in that instance it didn't happen. So yeah, very much Steve Roberts feeling the aggrieved, but can he make amends?
So the race leaders virtually nose to tail into the complex. This is where Steve got sideways a lap ago, about here as he hoofed it out of the corner. Doesn't try on the inside line just this time around, but let's see whether the move at Clairvaux starts now. Quick run out of the corner. So from the hairpin over the timing line, that completes lap 13. 2 to go then as they break the beam and down towards Clairvaux. Now the leader is just Matt Armstrong, and the gap is down again to 0.427 of a second.
It's very close, but it's hard to see where one has a particular advantage. They both use their tyres quite a lot.
Replay of Rupert Laslett. Now,
not another one.
We've already seen him spin here, and this time he has a different type of spin, but a spin nonetheless. Yeah. But that's not going to score as many points for style as his first one.
No, but he's clearly got a problem.
Absolutely.
He's clearly got it, because that car just spun halfway through the corner at not very high speed. I think he's just circulating, trying to get points, but the car is definitely damaged. So not a reflection on his ability at all.
No, indeed. We've seen it take that big whack from Carl Cavers earlier on, so it's clearly got the geometry all askew, and he's doing a manful job dragging it to the end. As here are the leaders into Sunny. The gap comes right down under braking. Steve Roberts, having led the bulk of this race, then being turfed out of the lead, wants P1 back. Out of Sunny, out they come. Now the run up towards the complex, but they're about to start the last lap of the race, so Roberts needs to dig deep now in his book of opportunities and see what he can do into the complex, all over the back of Armstrong. Can he get a run up to the hairpin? The answer is no on the outside. He thinks about the inside line, but no, couldn't do it.
Yeah, he was able to just back out in time, wasn't it? It wasn't a fully committed move, but he showed his hand a little bit now, and with 1 lap to go, it'll be Armstrong, I'm sure, on a defensive line into that corner next time round.
So they turn through Clairvaux, and Armstrong now feeling the pressure. So if he puts a wheel wrong, Roberts is there to pounce. From the right-hander of Hawthorne, they come into the chicane, absolutely together now. It's going to be a second win of the season, possibly for Matt Armstrong, or a maiden win in one of these cars for Steve Roberts. And on this part of the circuit, the gap stretches just slightly.
It does, but Steve is very good on the brakes. He closes up again on the brakes. Can he got a good exit now from Tower? There's a bit of movement in the cars. It's flat out in these cars through the Jim Clark S's, just pulling gears, absolutely flat out. Then it's on the braking where we saw Steve Roberts' car very good into Sonny Innes is coming up now. Can he close the gap a bit? He does.
But is he running out of options? Yes, because we've only now got Sunny out and then the run to the complex and the hairpin to go. So the move has to start here. Roberts is quick. He was 0.2 of a second behind starting this last lap. He's right there on the back of Armstrong into the complex. They will go left and then right. Then it's the hairpin. And Roberts desperately needs a good, clean, quick run out of the corner to try to dive up the inside. But there's no gap. Tries to be wide in and tight up. But I think Armstrong has just about done enough. It's the sprint to the line. Checkered flag at the ready, and Matt Armstrong is going to hang on in there to take a second win of the season. Steve Roberts second, and you've got a feel for him after being tipped out of the race lead. Third will go to Toby Trice, then Sam Smelt heading up towards the timing line, chased by Matt Greenwood and then Charles Clark. Toby Trice does take third, Smelt goes fourth, Greenwood fifth and Clark sixth as they come over the line, all of them in the pro class. And this man, Jason Pelosi, is on target to win in the AM category for the first time this season as he heads over the timing line from racing Renault Clios with the 750 Motor Club up to the big league of Porsches, and Jason Pelosi takes a maiden victory, which is really good to see. And the AMs were decidedly lively. Second in the end, but sorry, no, I'll tell you a lie. Second will be John White. Carl Kay was a lap down as he crossed the line, so it will be John White to hang on to second, and Rupert Lanslet, when he gets to the end, will be third. But you've got a feel for Steve Roberts, who was driving a really good race until that contact, and while it's a very, very happy Matt Armstrong, who's eager to get back to the pit lane and start celebrating, it's a very frustrated Steve Roberts, who is driving back much more slowly. And
I'm sure we'll hear that in his interview. He was nerved out of the lead, having done everything right so far. So very disappointing for him. But I'm sure his day will come.
Indeed, and he'll be on the front row then for the second race, so we'll wait and see what comes of that. That's going to be interesting, with Harry Foster near the back and Charles Clark lower down as well. So race 2 should be well worth watching later on in the day here as Matt Armstrong turns the car into the hairpin. And Matt Armstrong goes to Parc Fermé, and the second race of the day is going to be at 4:15, all being well with the timetable here, as down towards then Parc Fermé comes our race winner. Is a very happy Matt Armstrong who takes the race win. We'll hear his thoughts and those of a really frustrated Steve Roberts after the break.